And next up, we've got Chairman Mike Rogers and Congressman Dutch Ruppersberger, both of the House Intelligence Committee.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you?
You're on.
Good to see you.
Put this back here.
We've got a pile back there.
Good.
Well, Congressman, thank you both so much for being here. You've probably heard from the back now that we're asking everybody to give us their update on the wonderful government shutdown, where we think we're going from here. Chairman Rogers, you have the wonder of sitting next to me, so you get to go first.
Oh, look at the time. I think we're making some progress. There is, I think we're over half now in mini bills covering the federal government and funding. If we can just get to a point where we negotiate, I think this thing will get done very, very quickly. We haven't quite reached that point yet. I hope we have that point very, very soon.
Congressman Ruppersberger.
Well, what's your question?
Shut down. Go for it. Where
First thing, it's a shame that we're at this level. I'm not going to get partisan at all, other than to say that if you put Mike and I in a room for 8 hours, we might be able to resolve the whole issue.
I've been in a markup for 8 hours with the two.
I think one of the things that has to be done is we need to understand the consequences of where we're going now and how many people are being affected, not only employees. Private sector now is going to be affected. I live north of Baltimore. Sometimes it takes me 2.5 hours to come to work in the morning. This morning I came from Baltimore. It took me 1 hour and 15 minutes because of the shutdown. So it's an affecting everyone, and it will throughout the country. It makes us weaker as a nation. We are the strongest nation in the world, but we sure are not acting like it.
Sure. How have those effects been felt in the cybersecurity realm here? How has that impacted the federal mission?
Well, on the cybersecurity front that's been maintained, we have now gotten more folks back into the intelligence business. We're still short, so if they've taken a very strict look at what is essential and not in the intelligence business. I think they've overdone it a bit, so they have significantly laid off roughly 60% of their civilian workforce in the intelligence business. I think that's dangerous, and it shouldn't be allowed to continue. Hopefully we'll find our way through this very quickly. You can't take that many people out of the work that the intelligence community does and not have an impact. So other folks are trying to fill the holes with longer hours. Given the threat matrix that we face today, I think we need to work through this pretty quickly.
Presumably that would require a congressional solution to ensure that if this thing were to happen again in the future, that these intelligence workers that you say are critical aren't sent home.
Yeah, I think it will take a congressional solution. We have worked out something this week that we'll hopefully get through the House floor here very, very soon. This is something, at the end of the day, I'd love to see a temporary CR so we can continue negotiating. To me, would be the best solution now. Would let tempers cool down and allow us to get into a negotiating pattern that I think would be very, very helpful to the solution here. We need to do that pretty quickly. As I said, I hope we do it soon. We need to get these intelligence folks back to work. Again, the number of threats hasn't gone away. Certainly the rest of the world watches what we do. And you can probably guess that there are people who would like to fill in the holes, who want to do us harm. And that's what concerns us, and Dutch and I spent a lot of time talking about this stuff and trying to work through these issues.
Yeah, sure. Congressman Ruppersberger, you represent the district where NSA is. I mean, what are you hearing from the contractors around there? They're setting up shop. What are they saying about the shutdown?
The contractors are being impacted. I'm not going to name names. I was talking to one major representative, one of the major contractors. They're losing $20 million a day. And what's happening? Because there's not work. The intelligence is the best defense against terrorism. And when you have less people working on that in the cyber realm and other areas, we're going to be more vulnerable. And that's what's happening right now. I consider my district the cyber capital of the world. There are probably more people working on the cyber issue. In the 95 corridor, I represent Fort Meade, NSA, Aberdeen, which is the testing center for the military. It's mostly all technology in that area. And these people are being affected. And we're going to see the results of this down the road with that, and also the Snowden leak.
The other S word.
Pardon?
The other S word.
Yeah, right.
And that's actually the next question. So with the shutdown, also the Snowden leaks had seemed to put a bit of pressure on Congress when it came to cybersecurity. Does that shake up the entire cyber debate? Does that shake up everything on information sharing and require us to have to go back to the drawing board to restore public trust?
Well, on the public trust front, clearly, but the facts haven't changed. This is the greatest national security threat that we face as a country that we are not prepared to handle. And we have a very unique set of circumstances here that some of our best adversaries in cyber don't have, that we have 80% of the networks are private networks. And the bad guys use our networks to target us. That's important. So when they communicate, they will use U.S. networks. When they communicate either from a phone call or an email, they will use U.S. networks. That poses a whole series of problems for us to make sure that we aren't violating Americans' privacy, but we are targeting bad guys doing bad things to our networks. So I do think we're going to go through a series of confidence builders in these programs. Much of what you read in the paper is just inaccurate. It is not accurate. It's inflamed. It's not accurate.
What specifically is inaccurate?
Well, let me give you a great example. So the 2,776 privacy violations that were inflamed on the newspaper made it read, boy, when I read the article, I thought, my Lord, I must have missed something. They're out there searching for your personal information for their own desires, especially on the two programs we have publicly debated, our FISA 215 and the 702 program. At the end of the day, there were zero willful privacy violations in both of those programs. And what they were technical violations. Let me give you an example. So they were supposed to hold the information for 5 years. They accidentally hold it for 5 years and 30 days. That's a violation. And what they did actually was catch us, congressional oversight, doing their job. That's what that slide indicated. So if you take it out of context, looks pretty awful, looks terrible, looks like there's this horrible effort underway of all these abuses. Well, when you look at it with the facts and what was happening, it was the organization being overseen, reporting back to Congress, reporting to the court oversight body, saying, hey, we made this mistake, here's the violation, here's how we correct it, which was our job, is to make sure that they do correct those violations when they happen. Here's my other one. About 1,900 of those, a little more, were what are called roamers. I think most Americans would be offended, candidly, that this was considered a violation, meaning if somebody that they're listening to with all the legal authority overseas, somebody from Pakistan who flies to Dubai, they're allowed, if they go through this process, to do that. They can listen to those phone calls. That person goes to France, and then from France to the United States. Contrary to popular belief, they might not know exactly where that phone is at a given time. It may take them a few days, could be even a week, to understand that person with that phone is now in the United States. That would be considered a violation. Right? Now, think about that. So you get to the United States, I call it winning the terrorist lottery. You get here, and guess what? Now we have this big bureaucratic effort to try to change authorities, make sure that person, you have to turn it off. Here's the other piece. You have to destroy what you have. You have to report both to us and the court that that's a violation. Now, I don't see that as a privacy violation. I think it's something we're going to have to fix in the law. Hopefully we do fix that. It really doesn't make sense. And it's all about a bureaucratic handoff. And so what happens is sometimes that handoff doesn't happen as smoothly as we would all like. And when they fall in that category, it's a violation. So when you read the newspaper, it sounded like there were 2,776 violations of privacy, of people abusing roughshod over a system. I just think that is horribly inaccurate, and I think it's doing a disservice to the men and women who take an oath, who are showing up every day at the NSA, trying to follow the law, and oh, by the way, trying to catch bad guys.
Sure, but just to play devil's advocate here for a moment, we had an instance, there were a series of documents that the administration itself had declassified, showing an instance in which the FISA court had rebuked the federal government for having accessed digital communications of Americans it should not have. It was a pretty clear instance in which the FISA court said essentially that the NSA had violated the Fourth Amendment. So when you have instances like that, paired against what you say are just technical violations, doesn't that create a serious trust problem? And how do you fix that?
Yeah, but the way it was portrayed was, I think, helps fan the flame of distrust. But when you peel back and understand it was a technical issue, not a purposeful issue.
Self-reported, by the way, by the NSA. Too.
Exactly.
And the way you just presented the question, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It was self-reported, and it so happened that in the volume of information that was in the pipes, so to speak, it was all there, and they held that. when they held that information or that data. And when the courts realized that, they said you have to separate it. It was a separation, but it was self-reporting. The issue that we're really talking about, Mike and I have talked about this many times. We think that the United States media needs to report and needs to debate the issue of privacy. That's very important. But when you report and don't inflame. Let's get the facts. So we have a problem. We have a perception problem. And Mike and I and the people in this field have to deal with it. We need to get the public trust, because NSA, the people, and a lot of these are my constituents, they get up every day and they work hard and they feel that just like the military, they're protecting our country. And we have threats out there, terrorist threats. We have the Russia-China issue, all of these things that are occurring. And they want to feel good about themselves as Americans, so we have to find a way. Mike and I just yesterday had a meeting to talk about how we need to change some legislation and on how we do the metadata and try to find a way that we're showing to the public you can trust us. There are checks and balances there. People at NSA don't get up and want to listen to your phone conversation or someone else's phone conversation or find out if you have a girlfriend or boyfriend. That's not what they're about. So let's try to resolve this issue. We've tried in our CISPA bill. We've tried to do whatever we can to bring the ACLU into the tent and other people into the tent, as we should. That's our goal, and it's hard because there's a lot of issues as it relates to cyber that are in the weeds. It's very difficult to explain to the average person.
Sure, and I do want to get back to cyber, but let me ask you guys, while I still can, take us through the timeline on what's next when it comes to looking at the intelligence community, looking at some of these FISA and Patriot Act authorities. Do you have a general sense of where we're going, what we should expect before the end of the year?
For a couple of things, and we have been working, Dutch and I have been working with our staffs over.
And we have some different opinions on this too, Mike and I, at this point, but we're going to try to resolve it as we usually do.
We will work through, we've committed that this is too important not to work through our differences on this stuff. We worked all of August trying to put together some confidence builders that we think would have people understand we are interested in as much transparency as we can possibly get. We're interested in showing the level of oversight. These are some of the most overseen programs in the government, and I would argue both state and federal. It's unbelievable how much oversight we have on these programs. Because they're classified, it feels like the guy behind the curtain at Oz, in the movie Oz, right? You just don't know who that is. That mystery makes it interesting. Unfortunately, we feel if we can get through this and show the American public, here's some new transparency issues, here's exactly the oversight that we do, here's how minimization procedures work, we think that we can get there. So we've got a whole host of ideas laying on the table that we're working through, not just Dutch and I in the House, but also Dianne Feinstein and Saxby Chambliss in the Senate. And we've had some really productive
on their intelligence committee.
Right. We've had some very productive, I think, meetings over the summer. One again just was that last week, where we went over some of these confidence builders to try to rebuild trust in these programs, and at the end of the day, still allow us to do it. Remember, these programs are geared and targeted to try to find folks who are overseas who have a U.S. nexus. That's what it's all about, to try to find that one guy who's going to show up at Times Square with a car full of explosives and let it go. Right? That's what these programs are targeted to. We really don't care about collecting people's private conversations or data, which, by the way, they don't do. They don't listen to your phone calls. They don't read your emails, common to popular belief. And they're trying to target this list. So what we're trying to do is get them focused on their job. You imagine if you're in the NSA today and every day some article comes out that's fairly misrepresents, the work that you do. It's pretty demoralizing. These are people who took the oath. They're there to do the right thing, to catch bad guys. Every day in the paper, it looks like you're some kind of criminal who's sneaking around the playground, right? That is demoralizing to these folks who are doing critically important work. So we're committed to working through these differences to get these confidence builders. So we think by the end of the year, we'll have a package of confidence builders that we both agree on. It will be bipartisan, and we think will answer a lot of Americans' questions they have about their faith in these programs.
Sure. Just remember, tweet us questions if you have them. While I've still got both of you, let's turn it back to cybersecurity. Let's talk about CISPA. One of the big debates we had prior to passage of the legislation in the House this year was over minimization, whether a private company should have to take reasonable steps to minimize the private information that might ultimately land in the hands of the federal government. Is this a debate that has to be reopened? You know, you talked about confidence builders, but is this an issue that we need to return to, especially as information sharing finds itself a little bit bogged down in some of the Snowden saga?
Well, a couple of things. I'm not sure it ever went away. We've had really healthy discussions about who should minimize. My concern was this. Our whole goal with getting threat information, malicious source code sharing, and that's really all we need, when I say we, the intelligence community needs, in order to make sure that they increase the level of the private sector's ability to protect itself and the government's ability to protect itself. All of the information that would come with it, and it's not content driven, by the way, at all, is extraneous anyway. But here was the problem. You were putting the burden of helping the government help the country defend itself on smaller companies that might not be able to afford the necessary minimization requirements, and then it exposed them to all of this liability. And the whole goal of this is you want everybody participating in real time, hundreds of millions of times a second, and we're talking about malicious source code here. We're not talking about content. And that was what's so frustrating about this debate. Is people got it mixed up that the NSA now is going to read emails or do those kinds of things. So we tried to build some protections and some ways that people could understand that's not what this is about. This is about cyber threat information sharing in real time. Has to be real time. And so this minimization process would happen. So the company would have to try to minimize what data we all believe and would recognize as is PII, personal identifying information, which most would be able to do anyway, but the other ones that couldn't won't, so that means they won't share, right? So now that means a vulnerability in our system. And then it's going to go to the government, who is required by law to minimize. So my argument was, if you like the minimization firewall that we have, why would we require the private sector to do it and then send it to the government, who's going to have to do it again anyway? And who can do that better than anyone, candidly, because they do it and we watch them do it and we kick them when we think they're not doing it, is the NSA. And we watch that like a hawk. So my argument is, why don't we have the best filter for PII being at not the business expense, because I think defending the United States is all of our expense, and we get more participation. Do I win the argument at the end of the day? We've had this conversation.
The participation is what counts. Mike said it before, 80% of our internet in the United States is the private sector. So it's important that the private sector be involved, and that's what our bill's about. It's about encouraging the business sector to get involved and to work in a partnership. Right now, with the President's executive order, we can only now, and it hasn't really been implemented, they're working on it now, only pass information real time that's unclassified. But we have serious threats out there with the cyber threats. People ask me, as a member of the Gang of Eight, Mike's a member of the Gang of Eight, what keeps you up at night? And I'll say spicy Mexican food, weapons of mass destruction, and cyber attacks. And we have lost, in the last 3 or 4 years, Cyber Command has estimated about $400 billion. That's not million, $1 billion has been stolen, mostly China. And it's small companies. China, it's like a gift that keeps giving for them. They will even cyber attack fertilizer companies because they're in that business, and they want to get the codes. They want to get the recipes to keep competing. And again, just imagine how many jobs $400 billion is. So in order for us to bring this massive issue of cyber together, the partnership has to be there. And part of our bill to encourage business to be involved is the information sharing and the liability if they use good faith effort. And if you ask a fertilizer company to how do you minimize, they'll have to hire somebody to do that, and that might deal with their cash flow issue. They might not even want to do it, so they're not going to be involved. 100% participation we'll never have, but the more we have, the safer we are as a government.
Can I just bring up why this is so important? For whatever you think of the healthcare law, we're not going to get into debate of that.
Nope, not here.
Not here. But on October 1st, they opened up these exchanges. They created a federal data hub. And think about this. It has real-time connection to 7 different storage centers of information, the most personal, private information of every American in the United States that actually files their taxes, right? Or communicates with the government in other ways. There is no way in God's green earth they can secure that system today. We should be outraged by this, right? They can't do it. I noticed, I heard McAfee, the guy that created McAfee, I think it was yesterday or last night, was saying this, I won't quote him exactly, but a hacker's dream come true, right? This is happening today. We are exposed today. We're going to spend a lot of time saying, well, how is the NSA really a bad place doing bad things? And we have exposed every personal, I will tell you, we are going to have problems with this if we haven't already and just don't know it. they can't secure it. And they'll say, well, we don't store it on the hub. We should all be concerned about this. We should all be working on this. We all should make sure that if I were king for a day, the NSA would be over there trying to make sure that those systems are secure. They're not. We don't do that. They won't do that. That's a huge problem for us. So every organized criminal group in the world that 300,000 times a day goes after your credit card now has the ability to continue to go after. And by the way, 1 out of 3 of every phishing attempts, by the way, the number one way they'll breach your system is successful. 1 out of 3. Think about the hundreds or tens of millions of people who are already into that system, who get your personal credit history, they get some of your health stuff, they get your social security number, it all populates a website. I tell you what, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up that we have exposed Americans so needlessly on the cybersecurity front. We better fix this before we continue to move forward on this system, or we will all regret it, I'm telling you right now as we're sitting here. And I tell you what, there's a little piece of saliva on the corner of a mouth of a former Russian KGB agent in the Eastern Caucasus right now thinking this is my dream come true. I'll get all the information I need to steal the money that I need to steal to make me a very wealthy man. And unfortunately, he won't be alone.
Congressman Ruppersberger, what do you think about this healthcare data portal? Is this a serious concern to you as well?
Of course it is. But anything that we do, whether it's what we do in intelligence, whether we do national security, whether in banking, let's get back to the issue of our cyber bill, and it needs to be passed, or we're not going to be safe as a country. From a destructive attack, Iran, or it's been said in the media that Iran attacked Aramco, the largest oil company for Saudi Arabia, knocked out 30,000 of their computers. That could happen to Iran, who's not as sophisticated as China and Russia and other countries, could do that to our banking system right now. We know Iran exports terrorism. They tried to kill the Saudi Arabia ambassador in the United States. So they're capable of doing those type of things. It's like if you're a meteorologist and you see Hurricane Sandy coming up the East Coast, and you can't tell anybody. And that's how we feel with the CISPA bill. We have done whatever we need to do to deal with the issues of privacy. We have oversight. Tammy Duckworth, who you just had before, said that in the beginning she didn't want to vote for our bill because there's a perception that you're going to violate privacy. And Mike and I have worked for years trying to deal with those issues and make sure those issues of privacy are taken care of. But if we do not pull this together soon, we're going to keep getting exposed. 400 billion. It's a number, but it's big and it's real of what we have stolen. And now with what Snowden did, and that we have a breach there, these are areas that we are vulnerable until we can come together as a nation. And the only way that I see doing that is to have our CISPA bill passed. We got overwhelming support in the House, and Mike and I were really surprised at how many votes we got. But we educated people for 1 year. We took the freshman class to NSA. We let them know this is the threat, this is the privacy issues, these are the checks and balances we have. And we got overwhelming support. This is a new group of people that came in. And we were very surprised at that. But now we need to move forward and get the bill passed. And I'm concerned because of all the issues involving Snowden and other areas that are out there that the bill is going to slow down. And the longer we wait, the more I believe it's Congress's fault that we're not protecting our country.
Sure. So, and you both have said repeatedly, I remember back in October of last year, as the cybersecurity debate kind of got back into gear, that the House Intel Committee had worked very closely with Chairwoman Feinstein, with Senator Chambliss, coming up with some kind of resolution to this debate. But here we are in October 2013, and there still isn't even a Senate bill. Does that concern the both of you? What do you sense is the holdup here?
Well, again, we've had long conversations. There still is a big divide in the Senate, and I think the Senate is in a better place today, having more members fully aware of what the threats are. I mean, when we started this, if we said cybersecurity, we could have put 3 people in this room that would have been interested, and now half of you are asleep already. Okay, lighten up. It's okay. So that's been helpful to us in that people are understanding, hey, this is a threat. The threat matrix is going up. Not only are there are people going after your credit cards and your personal identity. Guess what? We have nation states trying to bring down our financial services networks today. Right? Today. This isn't Orwellian. This is happening today. So this is a serious, real, and growing threat. And we can no longer hand-wring about what people might think versus what the facts are. And I think we're finding that in the Senate. We're winning friends and advocates in the Senate of both parties who are coming to the conclusion we better do something. And the one smallest piece that we can do is this cyber sharing piece, this information sharing piece, that we think we can build in all the protections, all the privacy protections, and still have a functioning real-time effort. So I think that's what the holdup is. They have different rules. This thing might show up on a bill that looks a little different than the way we would do it in the House. I don't think we care about that. I think we've talked about that. It's all end game for us. If it gets on the, an agriculture bill in the Senate, we can argue that case too. We'd be for it.
And we want a bill that will pass that the public will feel secure, that their privacy rights are taken care of. You don't have privacy, if you don't have security. You don't have security if you don't have privacy. So we're painstakingly evaluating all the issues, and we're listening from the privacy groups. But we all then have to sit back and say, these are the check and balances. We probably have more check and balances in what we do in our Fourth Amendment and all of the privacy issues that are out there than any other country in the world. And yet still, we haven't gotten where we need to get. So we have to keep working on it. And again, I know that bill's out there and we'd like to see it going. I think right now we have to take care of the issue with NSA and to make sure people have confidence that NSA is not, or the intelligence community is not listening and the checks and balances are there. Because they probably do as much as any agency in the United States of America to protect us from attacks, especially terrorist attacks and cyber attacks.
Sure. Let's ask this then. And we've posed this question earlier. Should we expect some sort of cybersecurity law by the end of the year? Should we expect information sharing to conclude before the end of 2013? Or is that looking increasingly unlikely as we find ourselves talking about FISA, talking about the shutdown, things of that sort?
You might not expect it. You ought to pray for it.
But we've done it. It's in the Senate now.
We passed our bill. And
overwhelmingly.
And if we can get something into conference, and I believe we can, we will work out our differences in a way that I think.
And also the good news, we've been working very closely with the administration, the White House, on the NSA issue and trying to get the facts out there. And I think that Mike and I have even developed a better relationship with the staff and the people that are advising the president, so we all understand where these threats are and try to pull these issues closer. And I think whether you're Republican, Democrat, administration, we all know that we have to deal with the issue of privacy and we have to deal with the perception of privacy. And we're going to try to do that to change certain legislation, be more transparent. Maybe even the courts who can be trusted, they're federal judges, but there's a perception that there's a rubber stamp there, and we have to do things to change that. Maybe after a case, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but looking at things that some of these FISA opinions, as long as we don't violate sources and methods, can be shown to the public if they're really interested. We've got to deal with that perception of privacy.
Sure, you mentioned that perception and transparency.
Yes.
Applied to the cybersecurity realm, do we need to have a new conversation about the sort of threats we can newly declassify? As all this information is being shared between the public and private sector under the sorts of systems envisioned by CISPA or whatever the Senate might ultimately produce, there's going to be a lot of threat data. At some point, do we have to take a step back and think, hey, can we put more of this information out? Can we share more with the public about what we're seeing and how we're addressing it in the cybersecurity realm?
Well, again, the whole notion of the way we designed the information sharing bill was the government does an exceptionally good job about going and try to find out what are threats out there that maybe somebody hasn't used yet. Think about a very classic case. Public reports show that Iran went after Saudi Aramco, very sophisticated, more than we thought. And there are public reports that say Iran is attacking our financial institutions using DDoS attacks that is low end, but has a degree of sophistication, which means they have something that they haven't used yet. So they're probably looking for some vulnerabilities that should make us all a little bit nervous. Well, in that same vein, there are things that we know exist that are pretty bad and pretty awful. And the intelligence community can bring that back and try to protect government networks. But we can't share it because of the very classification of it with the private sector so they can protect their own networks. Remember, 80% of our networks are private. That's a huge problem. So what we wanted to do is find an environment as far upstream as you can get where you can share in real time information that the federal government might have, but it does no good if it becomes public. Because then they'll change that threat matrix and it'll come right back at you. And so we've got to find a way to protect ourselves from things that we know exist but haven't hit your network yet. That's why we think this is the right way to do it. Is there other ways can we continue to engage in things that we all know is out there and can share in a public forum? Some of that's already being done in the private sector. We applaud that, great. But I think we've got to be careful about that really nasty top 10, 15, 20% of these really nasty malicious attacks that are very sophisticated. That's the stuff you want to keep classified.
Sure. Congressman Ruppersberger, we've got about a minute or so left. You get the last word
Good
here.
luck answering that one. Go ahead.
Yeah.
In a minute. Okay. Oh, you want me to continue?
Oh, yeah, no, please.
Well, you know, let me conclude by saying that we know what the threats are and I'm going to get into cyber. We know what the threats are. We have worked hard to bring in all groups to deal with, and I'm going to focus on the CISPA bill. And as a result of us passing the bill, and I think the reason we had an overwhelming bill, the president was against it, and a lot of people on my side we thought were against it. But Mike and I took a year to educate the members, new members, old members who didn't vote for our bill the first time. And as a result of the education, knowing what the threat is, knowing that we're dealing with the privacy issues, and another big issue too, I think Tammy Duckworth said it, when we knew that we had to deal with perception issues, we didn't want the military to be in control of this. So we put in an amendment, Mike and I put in an amendment with McCall and Benny Thompson, that the Homeland Security would be the agency that would be overseeing that. That was a major step that allowed us to get a lot more votes. So I just think that we can learn from the negatives to go to the positives. I think where we are now, we're in a bad way, but I think this might be bringing a lot of us together more in the future.
We will certainly see. Again, want to thank you, Chairman Rogers, Congressman Ruppersberger. You guys stick around. First, though, we're going to invite our partner Raytheon back on stage, and with a few remarks is Jack Harrington, the Vice President of Cybersecurity and Special Missions at Raytheon. Again, Congressman, thank you guys so much.
Okay, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Johnny.
This way, guys. This way.